TPCSI fans, you want to revolutionize your sports investing habits? Allow me to tell you about WagerWire. WagerWire is an app that helps you become a superior bettor by allowing you to sync all your sports books and track all your bets in one place. See your current action, your betting history, and stats. You could also sign up for sports books and collect bonus offers. Follow them at WagerWire on X, as it's the best account on the platform. Head to App Store or Play Store now and search WagerWire and download the app.
2,000 years long, we will never settle. Hard days, no way, with a heavy metal. No time, no fail, won't stop here. Like a torch to a flame when it burns hot.
Good evening, sports fans from all around the globe. I am the host, Jeff Dawson, East Coast Sports Investors, and it is that time of the week for the closing bell with good friend and colleague, Mr. Ron Marmolevsky, live from LA. Today's headline: who wins MVP on Sunday? Lamar versus Allen in Buffalo. We got so much to talk to. Head coaches, who's coming, who's going, who's not coming, who's not going. We got a championship game on Monday in college, and then that season's over with. And then next thing you know, we'll be talking I was going to say the combines, but of course, you know, the kids where they put up all the jumping and all that stuff in Indianapolis there, and then the draft in April. And then we start this all over again. So a lot to talk about here in a short time. First and foremost, a shout out to our proud sponsors and partnerships, Atlanta Steaks and Seafood. Head on over to atlantasteaksandseafood.com. Use the promo code STEAKS10 and get 10% off your full order. Take a look at the 4 subscription plans. Check a box. Start eating right. And every 30 days, Terry will deliver to you steaks, fish, whatever your flavor of the month is. He'll take good care of you. Viva Tequila Seltzer, CT Vets Austin. The team second to none. Go enjoy a Viva Tequila Seltzer where you drink adult beverages. And last but never least, WagerWire. Head on over to Google Play, download the app, it's free. Travis Zach getting ready to head to Barcelona. Safe trip, safe travel, sends lots of pictures, and enjoy yourself. So without further ado, Mr. Ron Marmolevsky himself. Hey, Ron.
Good afternoon. Good to be with you again. Got to be focused on this show now. Well, time's winding down with college and NFL, and my wife's setting up all these vacations. So am I here or am I on vacation yet? Gotta juggle the two.
Well, just make sure to fit in your tennis as well, okay?
Absolutely, twice a week.
I've been actually, as I'm trying to decompress at night, Ron, I'm the guy, I'm watching the Australian Open in one of the 4 boxes. So got to stay on top of everything, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I woke up this morning and they were still playing on West Coast time. I'm watching Daniil Medvedev at 7:30 in the morning, Los Angeles time. I'm saying, wait a second, it's like 2:30 in the morning there, and he finishes at almost 3 o'clock. And boy, there's some fascinating matches coming up in the next day or two.
There is. Great way to start the new year off there. You know, I have so much to talk about the NFL, and we got 4 great games. I'm just going to go right to the college championship game. You know, I've said it on all my shows this week, you know, 2 big bonehead plays. I thought Sark's pitch play, first and goal from the 1. I said, there was no Bijan, there was no Earl Campbell. A lot of people said you should have brought in Arch to just try to quarterback sneak. Paul Stone came on today and said that he was concussed and he couldn't come back into the game. And then Drew Allard, 47 seconds left, 3 timeouts. And I had flashbacks of the Patriots and Rams from that first Super Bowl where John Madden is telling Tom, just hand the ball up and let's get to overtime. James Franklin just could have said, hand it left, hand it right. Worst case scenario, we're going to overtime. Thoughts on those two plays, Ron?
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up the pitch play and not the turnover beforehand, because you are absolutely right. That was the play. I understand how unbelievably tough Ohio State's front four is defensively against the run. But if you can't run the ball straight at them via sneak, via put a tight end or a 350-pound offensive lineman in the backfield, if you can't run at them 4 times and pick up 1 yard, you don't deserve to go into the next round. And there's no use going fancy there. The field's shorter as it is. Those bubble screens that Sark likes to do, that kind of stuff works in different parts of the field, but not there. So that was a strategic error, and in an otherwise pretty good comeback for Texas that had a nice answer to Ohio State, who got some sacks, did a lot of good things well, and you thought maybe they could win by margin, but in the end, that was going to be a toss-up game. And the other game was definitely a toss-up game. Notre Dame couldn't wait to get to the halftime. They fixed a few things. They survived Penn State's tremendous run attack, and then Penn State got away from what they needed to do at the end of the game. You're absolutely right. One of those runs could have broken off for 10 yards, and then they would have been in a different position. But I've seen coaches and teams get a little greedy, go away from their game plan, even with timeouts, and they feel like they have to pass to get downfield. Given the fact that the clock stops in college even for a few seconds after a timeout, unfortunately for Penn State, the wrong move.
Shout out to Mr. Russell Saylor. Thank you so much for joining us as always. Monday night, Ohio State opens up 9.5 with the 46, now 8 with the 46. As you said, Penn State dominated. I used the word dominated. They bullied Notre Dame in the first half. As you said, Marcus couldn't wait to get to halftime. Scored on the first 2 possessions. A coaching edge to Notre Dame versus Ohio State. That's what most people are saying versus Ryan Day. Ohio State only allows 90 rushing yards a game. Now, for Notre Dame to be successful, Jeremiah Love, I'd say, has to run for at least 135. Riley Leonard can't turn the ball over, and that's to keep this game close. How does Marcus, knowing that he's going to have a hard time running, is he going to in the first half just try to pound and adjust at halftime? Or what's he going to have to do X's and O's?
Yeah, it's a fascinating chess match. As far as the coaching edge, possibly head coach that way. But if we talk the other sides of the ball, the coordinators, Jim Knowles of Ohio State is somebody special too. But back to the Notre Dame, what do you do offensively? And that's, I think you have to hope Riley Leonard has a good day running the ball, which creates opportunities for him to pass the ball. Texas had a lot of splash plays downfield against Ohio State's one sort of weak link, their pass defense. I think it was at least 6 20-plus yards completions for Quinn Ewers. And I don't think Riley Leonard is that kind of quarterback. So I don't know if I don't anticipate Love running for 135 yards, but 135 scrimmage yards would be the goal. One splash running play and get him out in space in the pass game, because there are games that Love catches 3-4 passes, and in space, he's pretty talented. He seemingly has shook off his injury a little bit. And you could see the desire to get on the field, even if he's not 100%. So I think Leonard has to open things up by maybe getting out of the pocket and creating scenarios where he either runs or he flips the ball to somebody. His tight end is getting more use, for example, or getting Love out in space. I think he's just got to expand the pocket a little more.
Ohio State, to get to this, dominate. Well, they lose to Michigan the last game of the year, which we all know now was the blessing of all blessings. Opens up at home against Tennessee, dominates them, dominates Oregon. I mean, the game was over in the first quarter, basically. Then, put a good little whooping on Texas, but Texas was able to hold on, and the scoop and score, they win by 14. It was about to be tied with less than 4 minutes to go. We know Notre Dame doesn't want to play first one to 28 wins this game, but Ohio State's saying, hey, we get up 7-0, 13-3. Now they got to come to us. What do you think Chip Kelly's thinking offensively at the start of this game?
One thing Chip Kelly has in his pocket, because the sack differential, the ability to impact the pass game is the biggest difference, in my opinion, in this game. Ohio State has allowed 14 sacks in 15 games, which is amazing. Defensively, Ohio State has 15 sacks, I think it maybe 16 sacks in the last 3 games, 51 for the season. So that's the big difference there. I think Ohio State is going to do something a little differently this week than they have, at least if you're Chip Kelly. Hopefully you're varying your game plans, where you're going to try to pass on your terms. It's okay to run Judkins in this game. You and I talked last week, and I didn't think Judkins would have any success last week against Penn State, and he basically didn't. And they had to go to other avenues in terms of that. I think this game is different. You run Judkins, you put him in 2nd and 4, 2nd and 5, and then you try to get the ball to Jeremiah Smith, who was absent last game. He had 1 catch for 3 yards. Or you get to Ibuka, or you get back to Tate, or you suddenly discover G. Scott, your tight end, who had an efficient game with 5 catches. That was his best game of the year. So I think you use Judkins to open up everything else. That's the way that I would go.
Well, as we've been doing every one of these matchups here, Ron, give us the Notre Dame, if Notre Dame does A, B, and C, if Ohio State does A, B, and C.
Read off my keys to the game then. For Ohio State, can they be successful in the long pass game where their wide receivers have an edge? Will their defense be versus the pass be exposed? Or is Notre Dame maybe just not the type of team that can go downfield and do that kind of thing? Performance against quarterback Leonard, who I talked about, either maybe containing him in the run game or making him pass on 3rd and longer, which is not Leonard's forte. That's going to be very important for Ohio State as well. For Notre Dame, again, they have to counter what I said about Judkins. People are not going in thinking that Ohio State is going to have a power run game, but I'm thinking that's an asset for them. If that's really the case, then what in this case can Notre Dame do? Because they allowed running yards, a whole bunch of running yards, 166 to Penn State's electric top 2 running backs. They can't let Judkins have that same kind of performance. I think Howard and Ohio State will complete plenty of passes because he's a 65-70% passer. The question for Notre Dame, because they have a wonderful pass defense, is can they limit the damage? That's very important. Can they limit those splash plays? And can Love have a big game for Notre Dame? I think that's important. You mentioned him. I thought more, not just run, but run pass. And then what about Jeter, their kicker? We can't ignore special teams ever. He made his kicks last week. That first kick is so important for player confidence. How important is that? I don't know how many times Ohio State opens it up with a punt block, a fumble recovery. We saw the big game-ending play. Notre Dame has to avoid that. When I simulated this game, Ohio State had another one of those plays, and Notre Dame can't have that.
Well, Mr. Russell Saylor says, let's cut to the chase. What's the score going to be, Ron?
Yeah, I love to give out championship picks. I've been successful at it. I subscribe to what Tyler Shoemaker, I had him on one of the shows. He's very successful. He's done a lot of these plotting or whatever. I subscribe to what he says. Are we going to get Ohio State from the regular season? Because if we get Ohio State from the regular season, my power ratings support Notre Dame, that Notre Dame keeps this close? Or are we going to get Ohio State's performances stat lines from the postseason, which would support Ohio State, who's climbed in the rankings a little bit faster in the postseason? Bottom line is, I think Ohio State finds a way to win the game. They've been the better team. They were my number one power rated team at the beginning of the year. At times we discussed it, and I know other people have discussed it with you as well, probably Paul Stone and others, that they've climbed to the number one at various times again during and at the end of the season. My inclination, my hope as far as having a good game is that if special teams are pretty equal, that Ohio State wins this game by 7 and we have a good game, and maybe Notre Dame sneaks in on the point spread. But I'm not convinced enough to make it a play, because there's something about Ohio State that can make this, oh, well, we had another blowout in the championship game, ho-hum. I hope that's not the case. We've had a kind of a mixture of that, and we had 2 really good games last week, but somehow Ohio State holds the trophy.
Right now, 8-46, 28, 27, 20 kind of gets you there with an 8. So again, extra point here or there, 2-point conversion. We shall see there. NFL. Last game of the regular season. 90 minutes later, the Patriots fire May. Why? Because they want Vrabel. They get Vrabel. Heads are flying. Who's their OC going to be? Rumor has it Josh McDaniel. A week later, Mr. Jerry Jones decides, hey, first of all, Mr. McCarthy, you can't go to the Bears and get an interview. And then a week later, he lets him go. So I had Brady Tinker on, who's worked 2.5, almost 3 decades in Dallas for the Cowboys. He came on yesterday, and I eventually got to the question, is Dion coming? And he said it right here live. He says, no, Kellen Moore is Jerry Jones's guy. Ron starts. Prime time to Dallas?
Well, I guess if you want to sell tickets, that's the way you would go. He wouldn't be coaching his sons necessarily. He'd be with Dak Prescott. You can't just reinvent the roster like he tried to do and didn't do well the first year at Colorado, figured it out and did it incredibly well the second year at Colorado. There is free agency, but there's also a salary cap and a lot of other constraints on him. And there's the hovering of Jerry Jones in the limelight as well. Kellen Moore makes the most sense because he's younger. He could be, Jerry Jones could still be the face of the franchise. He could still be the GM. He could still make those crazy draft picks. He could still talk a big game and then miss out on 2 or 3 players. It's perfect for Jerry Jones to hire Kellen Moore, who may or may not be ready to be the head coach, but he's had a lot of experience. And I like the fact that he did that at more than one college. You hear this about people who go to grad school at a different college than they went to undergraduate. You get 2 perspectives. Same thing in the football and sports world. Kellen Moore has 2 perspectives. He's been with 2 teams. He's been with 2 different approaches and stuff like that. So I think Kellen Moore is a better match in the long run. But bottom line is they can't just keep patching holes in the draft. They have to be more proactive in what they do.
And you're spot on. It's if prime time comes to Dallas, now Jerry's got an equal mate. Wins and losses the first year won't matter. They'll put fannies in the seats because prime time's there. And versus bringing in a Kellen Moore, Jerry's still the face. They'll add Jason Witten and however else they fill everyone else up, and it'll just be business as usual. And if they want to draft Ashton Genty, they can draft Ashton Genty.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I would think although their running back did come on strong at the end of the year, but I think that running back would thrive more in a 2-back system kind of thing. There are only a certain number of backs, I would say 5 or 6 maximum these days in the NFL that could be a 1-back, a Derrick Henry type, a Josh Jacobs type, and so on. The other teams are better off using draft capital in other places and getting a 2 running back tandem system.
I'm having a hard time figuring this one out. I heard weeks ago there was a deal in place. Ben Johnson was going to the Jaguars. Well, I don't know if the GM was the sticking point, I should say. Now, supposedly, Ben Johnson, the favorite in Las Vegas, and then the two favorites in Chicago is McCarthy and Ben Johnson. So I'm going to ask you this question. Ben Johnson can either A, stay in the division, have Caleb, have a decent team around him. Don't forget now, he's leaving Jamar Gibbs, David Montgomery, St. Brown, Laporta. If you go to the Raiders, I feel like John Travolta looking it around. I don't have a quarterback. I got Jacoby Myers. Who do we have at running back? Oh, I have Brock Bowers. Go to Jacksonville. At least I got Trevor Lawrence. Maybe I can be the guy to fix Trevor Lawrence. I have Brian Thomas. I have some weapons there with Ingram. Does Tom Brady have that much leverage where Ben would come in and say, I got Patrick Mahomes twice a year. I got Bo Nix twice a year. Oh, and by the way, I got Justin Herbert and Harbaugh twice a year. I got a popsicle headache. Can you help me out here?
First of all, you mentioned Josh McDaniels. We all thought he was the guy having such a great offensive coordinator experience. We don't really know if Ben Johnson is ever going to be a good head coach. We hope he is, but these things don't always work out. So we first have to operate on that premise that Ben Johnson may not work out to begin with. My dream job of the three, and I think he would take it, is Jacksonville if he's allowed to hire his own GM. I think most people around the league who know a few things or two do not want to work with Baki because he doesn't give the roster enough clout. But Jacksonville would be, under normal circumstances, my top choice. I'm a little leery of going to Chicago and implementing that offense that he has because, number one, it's an outdoor stadium in a windy city. Number two, it's 6 games. And you mentioned what the Raiders would have to play. You've got a very young and ascending Green Bay team. You've got a pretty good coaching staff in Minnesota that I know that they're going to undergo some other changes, but it's still a 14-win team. And the Lions aren't going anywhere. So it's not an easy gig in Chicago, even though that might be the best management alignment for him. That's what he's got to weigh. And the Raiders, when I first started penciling out their needs, I ran out of paper. So those are his choices right now. We'll see.
Well, we'll have a lot more coaching. Sounds like Aaron Glenn's made it clear he wants the Jets job. And I think a week ago that they had already penciled him into the Saints job. Any idea on Aaron Glenn?
Saints job is attractive too. I'm not crazy that they still have the same GM that they've had for 20 some years because you got to change your stripes. You can't draft 5 1/4 players per year and be continually better. They worked it out because they had Drew Brees in his prime, but they don't have Drew Brees in his prime anymore. And you see what happens with a roster that can't withstand injuries. So that's a problem for New Orleans, but I kind of like that job if they could draft more players. Aaron Glenn will probably get a job this year. Ben Johnson, if he wants it, will probably get a job this year. It's not a bad group of coaching candidates. It's just getting the right fit.
And I'll leave the coaching carousel with Bill Parcells. Bill Belichick has not officially signed his contract at UNC. He's verbally like a napkin has a deal, but he hasn't officially signed that. So it's almost like he's waiting for someone to pull him in. Hey, I got Lombardi there. I got my son there. You guys are fine. And he wants to get back into the NFL.
He's leaving the door open. It's got to be the right situation for him, and it's got to be the right situation for the organization, because I honestly, other than special teams people, I really don't want him to have a finger on the draft evaluation. Certainly not on the offensive side of the ball. Maybe on the defensive side of the ball because he sees footwork and other stuff like that. But I don't want him to touch the offensive side of the ball. Russell mentions McCarthy. We didn't talk about Mike McCarthy's other landing spots. He could be gobbled up. He's won everywhere he's gone, but there's something about him that scares me. So we'll see. And maybe he's a fit for the Saints job. The Saints it's just not a bad job.
No, I think everyone's waiting to see where Ben Johnson decides to go, and then there'll probably be a frenzy for the McCarthys of the world, and then the Aaron Glens and whoever else filters through the process.
Yeah, they may have to wait. Detroit hopes they have to wait.
4 games. I'm going to go right through them all. Pros and cons, whatever you have on each of them. Houston at Kansas City opened at 7.5, now 8 with a 41.5. About 30 days since Patrick Mahomes has taken a snap. You're going to see a healthier Pacheco, D-Hop, Hollywood Brown, probably a rejuvenated Travis Kelce. At home, no one expected the Texans to be here. This was supposed to be Herbert and Harbaugh. Yet, the line is at 8. We're waiting for a train wreck somewhere. Ron, what are we going to get here?
First of all, I thank everybody who liked the Chargers last week because you were able to keep that line at 3, keep the money line where it needed to be. Wrong team favored, but that's a different story. Let's take devil's advocate here because you've hit all the high points. Of Kansas City. Pacheco is healthy, all the time off. Kelce is rejuvenated. Presumably he needs the rest. He's going to be force fed. And the receiver room is incredibly different than it was 8 weeks ago and stuff like that. So let's see, what does Houston have to do to be competitive? Because this is a nicely coached team. D'Amico Ryans is a very good coach, fundamentally sound. Houston disrupts people. It was mentioned, and I knew of this, but it was mentioned on our show about an hour or so ago by Ted, that some of the best quarterbacks' absolute worst performances were against Houston's pass D. So if Houston's going to win this game, they have to frustrate Mahomes. Part of that is by keeping Mixon on the field and the offense on the field. And then part of that is what they didn't do against Mahomes the first time, who hit almost 70%, but getting him out of rhythm. This is a team that limits your accuracy, and what they have to do is limit Pat Mahomes' accuracy. Find a way to get him flustered. Find a way to get him out of his comfort zone. They have to do that in order to win this game. And I'd say the other thing to do is stars generally shine in this type of environment. Houston doesn't have tremendous tight end play. I think Stover's out for the year now anyway. You've got to make it a Nico game. Have Collins just explode against a Kansas City secondary that may be a tad underrated at this point, again, with 23 days to prepare. But they don't necessarily have a shutdown cornerback, not somebody who could guard Nico one-on-one. They're going to have to devote extra coverage. If you can design things, and they have a offensive coordinator that's getting some play also for head coaching jobs as well. If they can scheme Nico open and he hits some big plays, playing devil's advocate, that's how Houston has to compete in this game.
Washington, Detroit is the nightcap Saturday. Opened at 10.5 with a 56, now 9 with a 55.5. Hats off to Jaden Daniels. The doink gets the doink win, the walk-off. Nothing but praise to Jaden Daniels, Dan Quinn, Kingsbury. Jaden's got a stud with McLaurin. A year ahead of schedule. I mean, let's be realistic. No one expected them to be in the playoffs, or never mind get a road win. Now they face another team that got some all-needed rest. David Montgomery, not on the injury report, miraculously will play. This is a Detroit team that in this spot here, I go back to my Patriot days. We had the week off. In came a tomato can, we called them. Double-digit favorites, and the final score was 41-10.
Yeah, so we got to play devil's advocate again, because technically wise, the same situation that Washington was in last week that was a technical advantage to them has flipped. they are in a technical disadvantage in this game historically. And it's hard to imagine based on a 25%, thing that goes 40 years or whatever that, well, okay, so they have a chance 1-4, but we have to play devil's advocate to get Washington over the hump in this game. And it's not that hard to play devil's advocate if you say, well, take that same game plan you used against Washington, Washington, Tampa, because they kept Baker Mayfield off the field. Baker Mayfield and Tampa, they were barely on the field. Mayfield only passed 18 times. He completed 15 of them, but he wasn't on the field enough. It was, Kelly of Buffalo all over again in the championship game where they had 19 minutes, of playing time. And they just, that whole K-gun system or whatever they called it back then just didn't have enough time. They were scoring on every drive, and Baker Mayfield and Tampa could have done that, but they weren't allowed on the field. So Daniels is a special quarterback. He's composed. He doesn't play like a rookie. He's going against a physical Detroit team, but somehow he's got to keep out of danger. He has McLaurin, like you mentioned. I don't think he has a lot of weapons compared to other teams. I think there are some players who are going to step it up. I like Zacharias in this matchup, but I don't think he's a game breaker necessarily. I think he's a move the chains kind of guy. Brown, Dayami, if I'm saying it correct, Brown is the game breaker, but he's not going to get as many touches, in my opinion. I think he's going to be covered. So Zacharias is going to move the chains, but he's really going to have to rely on Austin Eckler, who showed some glimpses last week, and he's going to rely on himself to make these splash plays, maybe break off a 30-yard run. So I think in Washington's favor is be unpredictable with Daniels and just try to keep Detroit off the field. Detroit's going to score. It's a dome situation. They're rested. They got a million weapons. They got Montgomery back in the red zone and inside the 5-yard line. They're going to have to play out of the ordinary. And the way Washington's dream season has unfolded, maybe it happens.
We get to Sunday. Rams travel to Philadelphia, opened at 5 with a 45.5, now 6 with a 44. Hats off to the Rams. 6 sacks in the first half. I think 9 for the game. And as bad as Sam Darnold was in Detroit, everyone wants to put the blame on him for on Monday. And again, he made some bad throws. He couldn't even hit a screen pass. But my point is he had no chance. And now you get a 6 days warm weather team traveling to Philly, and they're expecting snow, cold, wind. And historically, I think as good as the Rams defense looked last week, that's what the Philly D's going to end up doing to the Rams. And I think the Eagles, of all the games, this is the one I think if there was going to be the biggest blowout, I think it's this one.
Yeah, you're flipping the script because we had the Rams with all the advantages last week. Minnesota off Detroit in a winner-take-all number 1 seed matchup. Shorter week, didn't know which airport they were going to fly in, and so on and so forth. Then you have a rested Ram team who didn't dress anybody in the week 18. They come back. They have all these young, another good draft for the Rams. They get at the Minnesota offensive line, which underachieves, in my opinion, kind of year after year. I made a statement that I think they have to look hard at the offensive line coach. I don't want to be too detrimental to them, but they have some parts. I know Darisaw missed a lot of the season, but they shouldn't be allowing 40, 50 sacks or whatever. And they got Darnold back into bad habits. Well, now it's the Rams that have to go on the short week. They're going to go into the cold. They're going to do all these things. We had audio played of Sean McVay, and he answered the questions perfectly. I mean, Sean McVay is a really good coach, and everybody knows it. So there's a lot of things they do well. The bottom line in this game is, was it rust on Philly and Jalen Hurts last week? Because certainly they didn't play their best against Green Bay. Green Bay was prepared. Green Bay ran out of players. But if Philly repeats last week's performance, the Rams can certainly win this game, short week or not. I don't know what Jalen Hurts brings to the table stretching the field, but I do think A.J. Brown will be more of a presence in this game. That's important because even though Dotson made a couple of nice catches in the last game, he was invisible until the last game, really. I don't know if they can count on number 3 receiver, and most people can't even name their number 4 receiver. And I can't off the top of my head, and I follow the sport. So you got Goddard, you got Smith, you've got A.J. Brown, and obviously you've got Barkley, and you've got to address him and challenge him that way. But the other flip side, again, playing devil's advocate, is Stafford has really played well. I mean, why aren't we talking about Matthew Stafford more? Because he's been playing really great ball. I kind of agree with you. If Philly's has their A game, the Rams aren't going to win this game. They're going to wear down. They're just not good enough. Barkley's the best back on the field. A.J. Brown and Smith, that combination makes their wide receivers better. Philly is a deep front 4. They've improved on their pass D. On paper, they're the deeper team. Howie Roseman's done a nice job and all that. But Philly better bring more than they brought last week. That's what I would say.
I agree. Russell Saylor, LA has a QB and coaching advantage, but that's about it. I agree. And I'm rooting for the Rams. I think they've been a great story. Hey, listen, if I'm Mike Vrabel, I'm calling up the Rams. They might be poaching a few of their coaches, so keep an eye on that one here. I'm hearing some rumblings over there. We get to the game of the year. I'm really starting to have this feeling. You remember when Notre Dame opened up 1.5-point favorites against Georgia? Georgia got steamed to 1.5, 2-point favorites. By kickoff, Notre Dame was a 1-point favorite, 1.5-point favorite. Well, Buffalo opened up a 1-point favorite, and then presto bango, Baltimore's a 1.5-point favorite. Well, at the shop I respect the most, the Circa, it's back down to a pick. 10, 15 degrees, winds, snow. I guess a lot of people think the value's on the Bills with Allen at home. Can Lamar do it for another, 60 minutes, play that perfect game? Give us what you see in this game, Ron.
Well, I have to go back to 2 points about Buffalo. First, prior to last week's game against Denver, Buffalo didn't really belong in this conversation defensively. For everything Josh Allen has done, kept out of trouble and so on, and really, he's been magnificent. The Buffalo defense against playoff caliber teams really shouldn't be here. I mean, it just didn't grade out that strong. And then we saw last week, and I thought of all the 12 teams that played last week, the Buffalo intensity, the Buffalo defense, the physicality on both sides of the line was something I understand the Bills have a tremendous home field advantage, but the players, I thought that was the best focused performance of the entire weekend. And I applaud Buffalo for that. And it raises doubt in my eyes because I have Baltimore on paper as the better team. I think most handicappers that you would interact with would have the higher power rated team as Baltimore. And even if you think it's a pick'em game with Buffalo's home field advantage, that still means that Baltimore has the higher power rating and so on. But if Josh Allen is a tough guy to stop, and if he's not beating himself, and he hasn't beat himself this year, then Buffalo's going to score its points. And then the onus, the worry switches to Lamar Jackson. This is playoff football. Are you going to get the job done? And I think it's an unfair criticism, but it's still there, and it's still in his head and in everybody's head, and in Todd Monken's head, the offensive coordinator, who's done a wonderful job. So the big question for me, the big point for me in this game is, how do you stop Derrick Henry? Because they brought him in to make Lamar get past the playoffs and into the Super Bowl. And Derrick Henry, nobody wanted to tackle Derrick Henry last week. I mean, Minkah Fitzpatrick, who's a fantastic player, kind of did a matador a couple of times, and the smaller players they weren't even in the frame there. So is Derrick Henry that much of a difference that in a charged up atmosphere, Baltimore could avoid those lapses that they tend to have under John Harbaugh and allow teams to get back in 3 plays, 80 yards. Shakir catches a 36-yard touchdown pass, and we've got a tremendous game. Does Henry then close it out? That's my question.
Russell says, imagine having to tackle Henry in freezing weather. Ouch. And that's a big hell no. A couple of years ago, they faced off, and Lamar and company were driving inside, I think the 5 for the go-ahead and potential winning score. Turnover, ran back 85, 90 yards for a touchdown, game over. Number suggests first one to 27 wins this game. I'm going to say, here's the crystal ball. Here's Biff's almanac. What is the AFC championship next week, and what is the NFC championship game next week?
Okay, so I do think it's Detroit, Philadelphia. The Rams are scary, but Detroit, Philadelphia, they've been the best 2 teams for the entire season. If you throw out one game of Philly, which unfortunately for them was last week, they have deserved to be in the same conversation as the Lions, and I think that would be a fascinating chess match game. And I think those have been the best 2 teams. Kansas City was not the best team for a lot of this season, and an awful lot of the season. Buffalo at one point had my number. In fact, at no time that we did this, and you would ask me about who's my highest power rating, at no time has Kansas City ever been my highest power rated team. All throughout this year talking to you, and not even now, but they are a much better team than they were during the regular season. And they have all these advantages, just like last year, when they had those advantages of having that week 8 kind of bye week. They were locked into the number 3 seed. Everybody else had to play. And then Mahomes was Mahomes and stuff like that. So Baltimore has been a number 1 seed at times. So has Buffalo. So I think it is Kansas City waiting for one of those teams. And I think it's Baltimore, but there's something scary about Josh Allen. And so with no conviction, I would say Kansas City, Baltimore.
All right, you have your power rankings here. I have some thoughts here. So if we had a Detroit Philly, I'm going to open up Detroit -5 against Philly, which is going to seem high to everyone watching here. You probably get that 3.5 and have the public push it up. But I'm going to open it up Detroit -5 against Philly. And then Kansas City, I'm going to open up 1.5 against Baltimore.
Yeah, 5 sounds a tad high. Obviously, we're all doing this without knowing how Philly looks. Did they look ugly again? Because if they look ugly again, 5 is not going to be that high. But based on power ratings, you're right, 3.5, 4. And the 1.5 for Kansas City sounds good, because eventually, if it's Kansas City and Mahomes looks anything decent against a very strong Houston defense, then you're going to get into a situation where the public says it's Mahomes. He just doesn't lose. So you're going to get Kansas City money regardless. And you're going to have that Mahomes versus Lamar Jackson. You might have some sharps on Baltimore, but there will be public money that drives these high profile games. So I think that vaults Kansas City to favoritism.
And the funny here, it just dawned on me, is we go back to Ohio State and Michigan, and the most vanilla offense Chip Kelly and Ohio State ran out all year. And now we've seen the high octane express. So maybe Kansas City, with all this rest, all of a sudden they become the Ohio State. And then we're like, oh my God, this is what this team looks like healthy.
It could be. I mean, they could be a juggernaut. And because I had this partial conversation with Las Vegas Chris, in that mechanical power ratings or models can't really address how Kansas City's roster is now from what it was for 15 weeks of the season. And so we don't know what Kansas City's ceiling is, because I think they have a new ceiling. It doesn't mean they'll reach it. We don't know the chemistry. I agree with all that, but they have a new ceiling, and it's higher than it was because their roster is better than it was for most of the season. The worry isn't so much that Baltimore will revert back to whatever that crazy game plan was against Kansas City last year, which knocked them out of the playoffs. They dug their own hole. They outfoxed themselves. The worry is that some of these other teams will not be true to what their stripes have been during the regular season.
Yeah, Lou Finocchiaro came on at 3:00 for the UFC 311, and we started talking about the NFL, and he said it was the OC for Baltimore 100% that blew that game against Kansas City.
Yeah. One running back rush the entire first half. I think they're going to be reminded by the press and everybody that Derrick Henry is on the roster.
Lastly, I'm just thinking outside the box. I don't have any contracts here, but next year, September, Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice, D-Hop, and Hollywood Brown with Kels. I mean, how are you going to stop them?
Yeah, well, and it's good thing because you mentioned Kels, and he's probably going to slow down. It's going to be a rough off season for him. These parties are brutal at that age. So Noah Gray may be more in the mix next year, but yeah, that's the best contingent that Mahomes is going to have if he keeps him healthy. We don't know whether Rashee Rice will be suspended or not, so it could be three of them, but a healthy Pacheco added to that mix as well. And then a chance to double down on the defense that lost Snead, and in the backfield cornerback with Darius Snead, and didn't really make up for him until more recently. So if they fortified their team any stronger, I mean, they could open with the highest power rating next September in the crystal ball next year, a place that they weren't at all this year, and it wouldn't surprise me.
Well, I can't wait. The best football weekend of the year coming up, and Monday, of course. We always end this segment with a nice little 7.5-yard button hook and Ron's closing thoughts.
Okay, here we go. 3 thoughts. First, NCAA last game. You don't have to make a big bet. Don't ruin your season. Bet, if I can't find a bet, I'm not going to make it. If I can't find a prop bet, I'm not going to make it. If you want to bet in game, fine, bet in game, but don't ruin your season, anybody who's listening, on one game. Secondly, as I've said before, but didn't say much this week, the NFL wants these games decided on the field. I think other than protecting quarterbacks, you will get a protection from Josh Allen. You will get protection from Lamar and from Pat Mahomes. You will see roughing the quarterback penalties because that's the face of the NFL. But you're going to see, I think, fewer holding penalties, fewer defensive pass interference and stuff like that, unless it's egregious. With one exception, if fights break out, the refs are going to control it and they're going to change everything. But otherwise, you're going to see fewer penalties in these games and let the players play. So you're going to see some physicality out there. So finally, I know everybody likes props, and most of these companies put up prop bets. And I've seen and I've listened to other shows talk about what we talked about last week and what I talked about last week. Stars like Nico and others shine. I mean, you go to your go-to guys. You go to Puka Nacua. You go to Nico. You go to Smith. You go to Barkley. You go to, you don't veer from what got you here. But don't always bet overs, because in this round, you're going to pay a little bit of a premium. And books are going to put out more players because there's fewer games, so they want more things. I'm saying, just to open up the curtain a little bit and, kind of give you a little bit of glimpse into what I'm looking at, is if you see these receivers and you don't really know who they are, but, it's just 7.5 yards, they could go over that. It's just 1 or 1.5 catches, they're going to go over that. Don't worry about that. I'm going to be on the flip side, especially if the rules are such. There are some sportsbook rules that actually play in the player's favor. I'm going to be on the flip side. Your third tight end is not going to be featured if your first tight end is doing a lot of different things. I'm not going to be afraid to bet unders in these high profile games.
Rod, you're going to laugh at this one. We've been doing shows a handful of years now. We were doing the Super Bowl show a couple of years ago. Kansas City was in the Super Bowl. I had Noah Frank over 1.5 receptions. First play of the game was a reception from Mahomes to Noah Frank. Guess how many more catches he had?
Probably this then. Yeah. And that's a good point because teams want to show something different out of the gate, but then they're going to revert back to whatever. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised in the Super Bowl in the championship round is a team kind of comes out a little bit differently. It's kind of what I said in which one of the games did I say that? Now I have to look at my notes. There were one of the games. It may have. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but where they want to show you something a little different at the beginning. I think it was the Ohio State game. Maybe not here. The Ohio State game where I said, let's pass on our terms. Let's show you something different, and then use the run to set up the pass, whether it would be Riley Leonard or something like that. Yeah, you're going to see first drives that are scripted differently because they want your team to adjust. But after that, it reverts back to what you said, and then they're going to go to their go-to guys.
And I apologize. My one of my producers is Noah Frank. It was Noah Gray.
Yeah, Noah Gray, who's been more a part of. I mean, I've won a lot of overs on Noah Gray over the years because he's been a bigger part of the offense, especially when you see Kelsey a little bit banged up. And Kansas City has signed a multitude of tight ends during the season. They come and go. It's kind of the New England thing. New England, they sign like 10 tight ends a year, and then they drop them the next week or something like that. So tight ends are very much part of Kansas City's game plan if they can. But Houston might limit Noah Gray, so don't take my word that Noah Gray is necessarily going to be great against Houston.
And lastly, if the Penn State tight end is sliding in the first round and you see Kansas City jump up 12 spots, you know who they're taking.
Now, that's a good point because, eventually you got to replace Kelsey, and what better guy to do that? I personally think Jim Harbaugh would love to have him, but he's probably looking at the Michigan tight end. I think there's going to be a featured tight end on the LA Chargers offense in 2025.
Always a pleasure. Standing room only on Twitter. Russell has Gray as his only bet so far, over 11.5 yards. That's Noah Gray, not Noah Frank. Again, apologies there. Enjoy yourself. Enjoy all the games this weekend and Monday. Ron, we'll catch up with you next Thursday, same time.
Next Thursday, looking forward to it. We'll have 2 games on the docket, and I hope it's a spectacular weekend of action. Close calls, and some of the games, maybe not all based on my wagers, but let's hope to be entertained.
Raymond Scott Sports, great show, Jeff and Ron. Raymond, thank you so much. To everyone watching and listening again, go follow Ron at Ron A Sports, the best in the business. I enjoy our Thursdays. I think year number 3. God willing, there'll be a year number 4, and I can't wait. Everyone else have a great night, and we'll see you bright and early in the morning.